Hey guys, welcome back to Raise RC. Got a fun little video today. We're going to do a heads-up comparison of the TLR 22.4 2.0 and the Team Associated B64D. Now, I've had both these kits for a little while. The TLR for about 7 months and the B64 for about 3 months. Thought I'd do kind of a comparison of the two kits, pros and cons of each, which one I think is best. Stay tuned for that one. And just want to run through them real quick. Now, disclaimer, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I paid for all these kits myself. I didn't get anything free. I don't get anything free in RC. So I'd like to think I'm unbiased. I've had 4 TLR kits. I've had 4 associated kits. So, you know, I don't consider myself a fanboy of any particular brand. I just buy whatever I like, drive them, run them until I don't feel like I want to own them anymore. So, little disclaimer there. I think this is about as unbiased as you can get. I'm running the same electronics in both kits, running the same servo, the same ESC, the same batteries, same receiver. I run them with the same radio. I've tested them with the same tires. I run them at the same track. I run them back to back on the same day. So this is about as a good comparison I think as you can get. So, right now they're running different tires, electrons on the TLR and positrons on the B64, but I normally run them both with primes, Proline primes. So, yeah, anyways, just want to get in the review real quick. We're going to kind of talk about these two kits in the typical categories I usually do my reviews in. So let's kind of dive into them. First thing, the overview. On the left, you can see the TLRs kind of got a little more of a slender shape, a little more of a upright cab forward design on the body. The B64 looks, a little bit more like a shoebox, kind of a wide, flat, low, mid-cab design. So let's pop off these bodies real quick. And so underneath, you can see the layouts are quite different. The TLR comes from basically an older design, the double X4 that came out in the, I think mid-late 90s. It's 3-belt design. It's got kind of a centralized or really more of a forward-mounted transverse motor. Kind of a cramped design, I would say. It's kind of got all the electronics kind of jammed together here on the left, and then a little space for the shorty on the right. Kind of a dense design. So this is basically an evolution of the double X4 that they've basically been refining over and over through the years, getting a little better, tweaking things. And what you have here is basically kind of the final evolution of the double X4 as of today, right? It's kind of harkens back to some of the older requirements where it's got the fully enclosed drivetrain. There's no way dirt, dust can get into the belts. It doesn't have maybe quite all the adjustments of the B64. And then here on the right, you got the B64D, brand new design. It came out 3 months ago, right? It's totally different from the B44, complete redesign. It's got kind of a lineage I think you could trace back to the X-Ray and the hot bodies. Very similar design, very similar layout to those guys. So you kind of have two different approaches to the same problem, right? The 22.4 is a long evolution of a very good design, the double X4. The B64 is brand new, kind of all new modern style buggy, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more later. So that's a quick overview of the two cars. If you haven't already, I encourage you to check out my review videos of these two kits. I've actually did a kind of in-depth video on the 22.4 2.0 and an in-depth video of the B64D. So check those out for a little more detail. This one's going to run through a little quicker through the different categories. So that was an overview that's an explanation of the overview. The next thing I want to talk about is the build. And so I'm going to rate each of these things in the same categories and kind of give my opinion on which one I think is better. The build, I think, on the 22.4 2.0 was better. No issues with the manual, no issues with the parts. Everything flowed pretty quickly and easily together. The body's pre-cut, the wings pre-cut, the stickers are pre-cut. So really nice build, no issues. The B64D, on the other hand, Had some small machining issues with a caster block. Manual had a couple little things about like the divs weren't quite right. The bulkheads are a little bit hard to kind of screw your screws into. So I give the thumbs up to the TLR. Better build experience overall. Next thing I want to talk about is pretty much the design. So as I mentioned, TLR 3-belt design, kind of a complex interlock design. Hard to work on. I mean, there's no way of getting around it. It does take a while to get to some of these things. You do have to kind of unbolt a lot of screws, for example, to get to the spur gear. So design-wise, I want to kind of mention two different areas. And one is basically the adjustments. TLR definitely does not have as many adjustments. You can adjust, your standard shock locations, camber links, steering links, that kind of thing. It's got sway bar mounts. But it does not have like axle height adjustment. It does not have like front kick up or front track width adjustment. So really designed for dirt, I would say. Really meant for kind of like a 21mm ride height. You can't get too low on this thing. I mean, I guess you could, but your arm angles and dog bone plunge and stuff will be a little bit off. So on the other hand, you have the B64D, brand new design. I'd say incorporates all of kind of the modern technology or modern adjustments you would expect. So ride height adjustment, it's got the front and rear pill system, so you can adjust anti-squat, anti-dive, track width, toe in with that pill system. It's very nice, very easy to work on. So maintenance wise, the B64D is definitely, it's a breeze to work on. I mean, it's probably easier than my two-wheel drive vehicles. Getting to the divs is like 4 screws. Getting to, everything's kind of out in the open. A lot of room for electronics. Very nice, elegant design. I really like it a lot. The design of the B64D is very, very good. The maintenance is very easy. The adjustments are all there. Everything you want to do is all there. TLR, on the other hand, definitely difficult to work on. I wouldn't quite use the word nightmare to work on, but it is complex. It does take time. You do have to understand the vehicle, and it does not have all the adjustments that the B64D does. So design-wise, definitely the B64D. It's one of the most elegant, cleanest, nicest designs you'll see. The TLR is one of the most complicated, trickiest, sort of convoluted designs, I guess you say. So design-wise, B64D. Next thing I want to talk about is durability, and this one's a little bit tricky to talk about because the B64D has been out for 3 months, and I bought it pretty much the day it came out, and but it's gone through a couple of updates since then that are coming in the next few days. So TLR 22.4 durability is pretty good. I mean, I have broken things. I've broken a front CVA. I think I've bent a turnbuckle. The what do you call it? The front pivot block does wear out a bit or can break. I've broken one of those. I've broken a steering rack. So I've broken 4 or 5 different things, but I've had this kit twice as long as the B64D. The B64D, on the other hand, I've also broken a lot of things. I've broken front arms, like 3 sets of front arms. I've broken a rear arm. I've broken a hub insert. I've actually broken the A block here. Actually, the hinge pin ripped out of it. I mean, it's a really bad crash, but still, I've broken an A block. So I've broken 5 or 6 things on the B64D, but I haven't had it as long. And so as I bought them, definitely the TLR is a little more durable. Things can kind of slop out a little bit in the steering, and I've got a couple of videos on that. But out of the box, the TLR is definitely more durable. But the B64 is getting updated by Associates. So they're coming out with some new front arms, they're coming out with some new front bulkheads, they're coming out with some new even ring gears. They've got aluminum hub inserts for the rear hubs. So while I don't have any of those parts, I suspect in the future, maybe the B64D is actually gonna be a little more durable, but I don't know for sure. So this category is a little bit inconclusive. As I've bought them, the TLR is definitely more durable, but I suspect pretty much the B64D is going to be a little more durable. I don't know for sure though. We'll have to see. So, I kind of have to cop out a little bit on this category. I guess I rated a tie. I don't know. But there you have it. So the next thing to talk about is value, and the TLR sells for $399. The B64D, I think it's $429, a little over $400. So definitely the TLR is cheaper. It comes with everything you need out of the box, except the rear aluminum hexes. You know, you have to spend 25 bucks or so to get those. But very nice kit. I mean, you can pretty much just build it, throw on those hexes, and you're good to go. Pre-cut body, pre-cut wing. Comes with, you know, a lot of nice parts. The shocks are top-notch, machined pistons and bushings, all aluminum shocks, including the caps, the adjuster, the end caps on the bottom. So really nice kit overall. You know, you pretty much don't need anything except those aluminum hexes. So very low price, very good value. It comes with everything you need except for those hexes. So you throw those in, you're talking about $425 or so. The Associate kit, on the other hand, a little bit more. But if you look at it, there's quite a bit of bling, right? Carbon fiber shock towers, a lot of aluminum bits, all aluminum hinge pin braces, ABCD blocks, floating servo mount with a little carbon fiber piece there, you know, aluminum sliding motor mount. So a lot of bling on this kit. It costs a little bit more, but there's a lot of bling. However, I do think they kind of cheap out a little bit on some of the things. The body you got to cut, the wings super flimsy. Parts still come on parts trees. The parts are made in China, whereas in the 22.4 2.0 they're made in Taiwan. Stickers aren't pre-cut, so you know the shocks are definitely weaker. You know, they got molded pistons and bushings and stuff. You know, I've actually upgraded the shocks on this to machined Delrin pistons and bushings, so they are a lot better. I'm not sure they're as good as the TLR. The TLR is still super nice shocks out of the box. So overall, the value, I have to give it to the 22.4 2.0. It's cheaper. It's got, you know, a lot of small details, I think, that add up to being a better overall value. But you know, it's not like there's a big difference in price. But I do think the TLR is slightly better value-wise. Next category, support, and Team Associated, no doubt, is definitely the best supported company in the world, right? You can get more team kits, you can get parts everywhere, a lot of aftermarket parts. You know, there's a lot of good customer support if you call them up and you have issues. So Team Associated, the best supported platform in the world. TLR is still very good. You know, there are a couple areas I think they do a little better job on social media and online. But you know, they're just not as common, obviously, as Team Associated. Team Associated's like everywhere. TLR, still very popular in the US, but maybe not quite as well supported. So support definitely goes to Team Associated. And so the last category I want to talk about is performance, which obviously is the most important category. And I'm going to break this down in a few different areas. So first thing, acceleration. And let me talk about the design a little bit, right? The TLR's got front and rear gear diffs. It's got a center slipper. It's got a 3-belt drivetrain. There's no option for a center differential. On the other hand, the B64D's got 3 gear diffs, front, center, rear. They both have CVAs throughout. Yeah, the B64D, you know, definitely drives a little different than the TLR 22.4. So in terms of acceleration, I do find that the TLR is a little more, actually not a little more, a lot more direct between the throttle and the performance of the car. You know, as you pull the trigger, you just get a very direct feeling between what the car is going to do and what you're doing with your throttle figure. So the acceleration not only is more direct, but I think it's a little better, and I assume it's because of the slipper clutch. You get more immediate and more direct acceleration. I think a little more forward traction, at least with the out-of-the-box setup. So TLR, I have to give the advantage in acceleration. In terms of braking, TLR also has a, what do you call it, a front one-way clicker. You can actually tune the front braking percentage and, you know, kind of adjust how much front tire braking you have. You know, most people don't really use it, but braking I do think is also a little better just because you have that adjustment. So I'm going to give the edge also to the 22.4 2.0. Acceleration and braking on the B64D is very good. It's got that center gear diff, so I'm not quite sure it's quite as direct, and you know, it'll kind of, obviously because it's kind of searching for traction on each individual wheel, and each individual wheel can actually turn individually and independently. Maybe the acceleration and braking is not quite as good. That's just kind of the way I've noticed it. Next thing I want to talk about, jumping and braking. So jumping and braking is jumping and landing. Jumping and landing is definitely different between these two kits. TLR tends to spring up a little bit more, kind of jump a little bit higher. The B64D I find tends to jump a little flatter through the air. The 22.4 also, I think, nosedives a fair amount. So flying through the air, jumping, I think the B64D is a little bit better. The 22.4 is a little more stable through the air. I don't know if it's because of the belts or what, but landing wise, the TLR, you can actually land and get on the power, I think, a little bit quicker, a little bit sooner. You know, the funny thing with these two kits is the TLR always feels very direct in terms of throttle application. It's very easy to modulate. It's very clear what the car is going to do and respond to with throttle inputs. The B64D, I think it's because of the 3 gear differentials. You know, there's a lot of spots where there's just a tiny bit of play, right? You've got mesh going on between the pinion gear and the spur gear. You've got mesh going between these basically outdrives and dog bones, both, you know, 4 different spots on each end of the dog bones. Then you've got another little bit of mesh going on with the ring gear and pinion gear here inside the differential. So there's just a hair amount of play in all those different spots, and you know, you're talking 8, 9 different spots where there's just a tiny bit of play. And so what happens, there's just a tiny bit of slop just throughout the drivetrain, and that's just normal, right? That's just inherent to this design of vehicle. But all those little bits of play, in my mind, seem to kind of add up when you pull the trigger. You kind of pull the trigger and you're not exactly sure what's going to happen. You're not exactly sure how much the car is going to respond. You kind of have to guess, kind of look at it and see what happens. The TLR, on the other hand, fully belt drive system. There's absolutely no play in anything at all. I mean, there's obviously some between the pinion gear and spur gear and then some of these outdrives. But throughout the whole center drivetrain, there's no play at all. So everything feels super direct, especially with that slipper in there. Everything's very direct and very controllable. So, you know, kind of a long way of talking about performance, and that's how I would kind of categorize the major difference between these two vehicles. So back to landing, the TLR, I feel like you can kind of get on the power a little quicker, and you actually need to get on the power. This thing does not like to land off power. Whereas the B64D, I think, kind of lands a little more smoothly, it flows a little more, but it doesn't quite seem to jump out of the, you know, on landing quite as quick as the TLR. So I've run both kits with the same motor. You know, I've actually put this motor in that kit, in the reading motor over here in this kit. So I've run them, you know, basically the same electronics, the same motors, and that's just kind of my opinion jumping. So I think the B64D jumps a little better, flies a little better, and lands a little more smoothly. I think the TLR actually lands and gets on the power a little better. So overall, jumping and landing, I give the edge to the Associate. I think it's a little more forgiving, although I think you may actually be a little quicker with the 22.4 if you can land it, you know, perfectly. It does not like to land off, you know, it needs to land on all 4 wheels at the same time. It's not very forgiving in landing. Probably the major criticism I would have with how it drives. Otherwise, it drives quite well. So the last category is actually steering, cornering, you know, how it gets into, through, and out of the corner. The TLR, I would say, is a very neutral driving style. It's very intuitive. It's kind of the way I would describe it. Steering is probably not quite as quick as the B64D, and that may be partially due to setup, but kind of out of the box setup and out of the box configuration. The B64D definitely enters the corner quicker, a little more corner entry steering. I think it kind of flows through the corner a little better, and I'm assuming that's because of the center diff, right? When you're going through a corner, every tire is actually following a slightly different arc and needs to rotate at a slightly different speed. So the center differential allows you to do that. with the slipper on the 22.4, you can't do that, right? Front and rear kind of has to move at the same speed. So you kind of notice that a little bit in the cornering. I think the B64D flows a little better and steers a little quicker for sure. Now the 22.4 on the other hand is very neutral. It's very easy to drive. I think the corner exit is very good. It has tons of forward traction. I mean, once you kind of reach the apex, I mean, you can just kind of nail it. The B64D, it drives fine. There's nothing wrong with the forward traction, but it just drives a little more edgy, a little more, I don't know, kind of pumped, or a little more aggressive, I would say. I think you can probably do well, I don't know. You might be able to do quick hero laps, I think, with the B64D, although I think the 22.4 2.0 is just more consistent overall. It's easier. When you drive it, you pretty much feel like Superman. You feel like you can put the car anywhere you want, you know, whereas you're trying to put this B64D within a matter of, 6 inches from the apex. You're trying to put this thing, like 3 inches from the apex. It's just that much more precise, even though I don't think it's quite as aggressive and maybe not quite as aggro into and through the corner as the B64D. So cornering, it kind of comes down, I think, to personal preference, personal style. I think most people probably do more consistent laps with the 22.4 2.0. B64D, I think you may be able to throw down a few more hero laps, but it definitely is not as precise or not quite as accurate, I guess you would say, in terms of placing the car exactly where you want. So performance-wise, I've kind of talked about a bunch of different things: acceleration, braking, steering, cornering, jumping, landing. And so what does it come down to? Which kit do I think drives a little better? I mean, they definitely have a different style. The B64D seems to respond better to kind of having a flatter, kind of, at least at our local indoor clay track, it responds better with less roll and just kind of having a fairly stiff suspension where you're just kind of railing through the corners. That's kind of the description I would say on how this car drives. It looks very flat. Part of it's down to low ride height and kind of how the body sits on the car, but it looks very low, it looks very flat, it just kind of rails through the corners and around all the turns and stuff, whereas the TLR looks a little more upright. It does have a little bit higher ride height, from the kit set up. It does tend to roll, I think, a little bit more, and it seems to be a little bit happier rolling a little bit more left to right, but it sticks, and it's very precise. And so performance-wise, my preference is actually for the 22.4 2.0. I find it easier to drive. I find it a little just better overall. I mean, it doesn't land that well, but overall, you really feel like a superhero driving this car. Whereas the B64D, it's doing things and you're providing input, but you don't quite have as good feedback and quite as good precision with how the throttle is being applied and how the car is driving. And I really think it comes down to a lot of that center drivetrain layout with a tiny bit of play, throughout the car. You kind of pull the trigger, you kind of do things, and then the car responds, and you kind of hope it does what you think it's going to do. Whereas the TLR, it's very intuitive. You feel very one with the car. You feel very precise with the car. So, I know that was kind of a long explanation of performance, but I think that's an important topic, and hopefully that provides some insight on how I think these two cars drive. Obviously, some of you guys are going to disagree. You're going to say, well, the B64, no, what are you talking about, man? It's the best car ever. Drives awesome. The TLR sucks, whatever. Or the TLR, drives and lands, perfectly. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never flipped the car. So whatever. That's my opinion. Performance, I give the edge to the TLR. So that's pretty much it for the review. So what's the conclusion? I've talked for like 25 minutes. What car is better? What should you buy? So I don't want to make this a cop-out, and so I am going to give my opinion. In my opinion, for me, I think the TLR 22.4 is a little bit of a better car. I think it just drives a little better, which is the most important category. And I think there's a little bit of personal preference, or it kind of depends on what you value, right? The TLR, I think, is kind of like marrying a supermodel, right? It's high maintenance. You're gonna have to pull it with a lot of crap, but man, it's a nice car, right? It's a sweet ride. I mean, That's just the way it is. The B64D, I think, is kind of like marrying, you know, the girl next door. She's nice. You've known her since the 2nd grade. You know, you get along fabulously. There's no drama. Very easy to live with. You know, you're going to be just happier and just very content, you know, overall. You're going to have less fights, less arguments. You're just going to be happy with this car and not really have any complaints. And I think the B64D that's kind of its strong point. It's just a very good all-around car, very good design. It's a breeze to work on, lots of parts, support, etc. I think the performance will also improve over time, and you know, there's obviously going to be better setups and stuff going forward. This is a brand new design, but the 22.4, it just drives better in my opinion. You know, out of the box, you just kind of put it together, throw it down, drive it, and you're dialed, man. I mean, you really don't have to do anything. It drives amazingly well. It's the best driving car I own. You know, a couple caveats: if you're running, you know, sort of spec racing with like 13.5 motors, the Associate's probably a better choice. Just because there's more hop ups, it's a little bit lighter. It weighs about 45 grams less than the TLR. You can get, you know, puck systems for all the drive shafts. You can obviously make it a very good 13.5 racer. Also, if you're running on like carpet, AstroTurf, super high traction, you know, you can get a lot lower ride heights with the B64D, you know, so probably in those surfaces, this is probably a better choice. The TLR, you can't really adjust for those high traction surfaces. I'm sure there are guys in Europe driving this kit, but for the most part, it's really meant for a dirt car, in my opinion. So that's kind of the caveats. If you're running high traction, if you're running spec, maybe the Associate's your better choice. I actually have this set up as a 13.5 racer, and then my TLR is set up as a mod kit. So, but overall, if you force me to pick one, I'd probably pick the 22.4 2.0. It's probably a kit I'm going to keep, you know, forever, unless you come with a 3.0. The B64D, a little more derivative, a little more like the other guys, but I think there's nothing wrong with picking the B64D. I mean, if someone, you know, were to ask me which car would you recommend, it's actually a slightly different question than what car would you own. I think the 22.4 car for me is a better car in the way I drive, but I think for most people the B64D is just going to be easier to live with. They're going to be maybe happier overall, you know, in kind of like the full car experience. Just because it's easier to work on, just because it's easier to get stuff, just because it's easier to get setups, just because it's just an easier car overall. So that's my conclusion. You know, maybe not what you're looking for. I don't know. For me, the TLR 22.4 2.0. So that's pretty much it. I know this is a long video. Hopefully it was interesting and enjoyable for you guys. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. I know it's a long one, and I hope you enjoyed it. So thanks for watching, and look for more videos soon. Take care, guys.